is seller's discretionary income and how that plays a role in exiting, because this is something that really stuck out in the EXITpreneur's playbook, because you talk about seller's discretionary income completely different than what I've heard. And there were little things that I'd never even thought of that could be kind of add backs.
Yeah.
And that's what really stuck out to me. So I'd love to just dive into that.
Yep. So I'm going to clarify, it's seller's discretionary earnings, or SDE is the typical term that's used in the online world in the sub $25 million range. So what the heck is it?
Yeah, I meant to say SDE, but yeah. For some reason in my notes said income.
That's all right. A lot of people do the same thing. So what is it? So you run that profit and loss statement and you get net income. That is not what the multiple of, let's say, 3 or 4 is applied to, because you as an owner, operator, probably take a salary. You might have some health benefits. You might contribute to your 401k. You might even run your car through the business, even though it's an online business. Or you traveled to Vegas for the Prosper Show, but you stayed an extra week and wrote it off through the company. Those are all owner benefits. So those are called add backs. So when you run a profit and loss statement, what I ask people to do is export it to Excel with a monthly view. And then I build an add back schedule below the net income line. Okay. Add backs are one-time expenses and owner benefits that don't carry forward to the new owner of the business. Well, the owner benefits do, but the one-time expenses don't. So net income plus add backs equals seller's discretionary earnings. Let me give an example of it. I was at an event last October for 8-figure sellers, about 25 of us, and we're sitting around a fire pit. And guy sitting next to me is talking about his clothing business, where he does about $50 million a year in revenue. And he had an offer on the table. Somebody approached him and made an offer on the business, and he wanted to know if the offer was good. And so I started to dig into his net income, his discretionary earnings. And I said, did you do an add back schedule? And he kind of had a blank look on his face. And he said, what's an add back? I said, well, do you have any cash back money that you get from purchases that you make? And then he got all excited. He's, oh, hell yes, Joe. I do credit card stacking. We get about $50,000 a month in cash back money because I use one card and then I use the next, and we really take a huge advantage of it. I said, all right, Kevin, that's $600,000 a year in cash back money. He said, yeah. I said, well, where does that go? He goes, it goes over to my personal account. I'm like, okay, that's what a lot of people do, and that's okay. The IRS hasn't figured out how to tax cashback money. It's actually a discount on advertising anyway. So that's $600,000 that's not in his P&L anywhere, and not in the add back schedule because it's not in the P&L. So you need to know to ask that question. That's an owner benefit, right? It's a perk. That $600,000 goes back into the add back schedule, and you can add or subtract zeros to suit your needs here. But Kevin's business, was selling for a 10-time multiple. That's the offer that he got. So $600,000 added to the add back schedule adds $6 million to the value of his business. Okay. It's one small example. Your salary is another.
That was one of the biggest ones that struck me, was like, I could have brought my cashback rewards because we've used it to pay for our groceries for 5 years now. And we lost it because, we were spending close to $150,000 a month on advertising, and that's gone now. So it was very sad to see it go, but that was $3,000 in cashback rewards. That could have been $36,000 for the year, which with our multiple, it could have been another $100,000 to $200,000.
Yeah. And all of that matters, right? I've got a son at NC State here in North Carolina. That's $25,000 a year. Doing the adjustments and paying attention to these numbers pays for a semester, a year, maybe even 4 years of your child's tuition. And I try to get people to understand and drill down into those types of numbers, because that's what matters. The FBA aggregators, for instance, right? They're big advocates of, sell your business, avoid the broker fee. It's better when buyers and sellers work together. The reality is their job is to buy an FBA business for as little as possible, because they're trying to get the maximum value for investors. We talk about expenses that don't carry forward. If you're selling to an FBA aggregator, they already subscribe to Helium 10 and Jungle Scout, right? So if you subscribe to Helium 10 and Jungle Scout at $200 a month or $2,400 a year, and you're selling just to an aggregator, that's an add back. If you're selling at a 3-time multiple, that's $7,500 roughly. That's added back to the bottom line and to the value of the business. these types of things, and I go through 18 of them in the book. That one I just mentioned with the Jungle Scout and Helium 10 is one that I didn't get into the book. But they all add up. It could be, again, the cash back money, the salary. It could be, this might be surprising, but what about a website redesign, right? If you redesign your website on an annual basis, it's an annual expense. It's not an add back. But what if you redesign your website every 4 years and you spend $20,000 each time? If I'm selling your business today and you just did your redesign last year, I would argue that it's at the very least a partial add back. If you do it every 4 years, I might do an add back for 15,000 of that 20,000. And that 15,000, it's math and it's logic, right? I don't do the redesign every year. I do it every 4. So 75% of it is added back. That times a 3-time multiple is going to add $45,000 onto the list price of the business. And this is not slippery. It's not magic. It's math and logic. And it makes sense in black and white. And you really can't argue against them. At least the 18 that I put in the book. Even the Helium 10 and Jungle Scout add back, if you're selling directly to an aggregator, you can't argue it because they already subscribe. That expense doesn't carry forward to them.
So I've got a question regarding that. So I'm going to use Thrasio as an example. So Thrasio is the biggest aggregator in our space. They use Quartile. So Quartile is an Amazon PPC software, an AI software that they use for their Amazon PPC. Now, I used Quartile in my business, I Love, and I was going to sell to Thrasio. Could I have then taken that Quartile fee and then done it as an add back? Because it's not cheap.
If it's an expense that doesn't carry forward to them and you know that they use it and they already subscribe for all of their other brands and it's not going to cost them anything more, you can logically argue that this is an expense that doesn't carry forward. Therefore, it's an add back.
Yeah.
Argue against that.
Yeah,
argue against it. So, right? It's an expense that doesn't carry forward. So
what if,
but the key thing though, Travis, is you're selling directly to Thrasio and you know that they subscribe to Quartile.
Because they plug it into your Seller Central before you purchase them so they can start analyzing it. So what if I hire an Amazon PPC agency and we know that they have their own in-house Amazon PPC team?
Again, this gets to specifics. If you know that you're selling directly to an aggregator, then you have to do some math and logic in the add back schedule and say, look, we pay our Amazon agency 10% of our whatever, right? And you can do a logical add back for that. But you can't just list your business for sale and say, okay, you can bring the PPC in-house, so I'm going to do an add back for all the agency costs. You can't do that. But if an aggregator approaches you and you know that they've got an in-house agency, it's an expense that doesn't carry forward. You can argue that, again, using math and logic, and they would have a really hard time telling you that you're wrong.
And I think a key point to this is everything is negotiable. It's just like buying a house. It's exactly like buying a house. You can say that I want to keep your living room furniture, or I want to keep your kitchen table. Everything's negotiable. So what's an add back versus it's all about the buyer and seller kind of coming to that agreement.
But
there are some, yes. But
when you're listing the house for sale, you're going to put all the add backs in there first. No, not with the P&L. You're going to create the add back schedule so that when the buyer looks at the business, they're making an educated decision. They already see the add backs and they agree or disagree with them. And that goes into the letter of intent. Now, there's going to be exceptions depending upon the aggregator in this situation that buys your business. I just listened to a podcast with Bill D'Alessandro and Mike Jackness called Dirty Tricks Aggregators Play, I think, where Bill was selling one of his brands to an aggregator. They signed off on the add backs in due diligence, and they were a couple of weeks away from closing. And then another person came in and said, yeah, we don't disagree with the add backs. We need to take $520,000 off the list price. Take it or leave it. Just a dirty trick. And they also knew that Bill needed to close before the end of the year in order to get tax advantages and so on and so forth. So they played some games. But the key is that you don't come up with the add backs with your buyer. You create the profit and loss statement with all of the add backs in it and the seller's discretionary earnings. And then your multiple is applied to the seller's discretionary earnings. You got to do the work upfront in advance so that you give everything to your buyer to make an educated decision. It's not up for negotiation after the fact. It's there in black and white. That goes into the letter of intent. And then you can't, there should be no renegotiation and due diligence like Bill's aggregator did. If there is, it should only be math and logic oriented, so that if your discretionary earnings is off by $10,000 and you are under LOI at a 4-time multiple, then you take $40,000 off the list price. Math and logic. But they played a dirty trick in a game knowing that they had an advantage because he couldn't go out and find another buyer in 20 days.
Well, so ignore my housing example for all the listeners. Just ignore the housing example. But I like your philosophy better. Come to the table with it. Don't negotiate it. Amazon PPC may seem like a complex subject, but it doesn't have to be, and that is why we created this channel. On top of Amazon PPC, we're going to share different tactics and strategies that we've used to build a multi-million-dollar business, as well as the strategies that we're using to build a $100 million company, which is our goal. We don't know how we're going to get there yet, but that's our goal, and we want to take you along for the ride. So make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the little bell to be notified whenever we come out with great business building and Amazon PPC strategies.